COVID-19 is wreaking havoc all over the world. This is not a pro wrestling story. This is potentially a global catastrophe, is what this is. And not just on the medical side of things, but if it grinds the economy to a halt, that's going to be devastating for a lot of people. And we're already seeing signs of it. It's going to be potentially devastating for a lot of people. I've never seen anything like this before in my lifetime. Not since 9/11 have I seen and just felt this sense of and you hear it not just on TV, but just everywhere, the sense of panic and dread. And, is it overplayed in some circles? Sure. You're always going to have people who overplay it. But a lot of it also, frankly, is probably justified given everything that's going on. And to put things in perspective, this virus is going to kill far more people than were killed on 9/11. Globally anyway, although it seems inevitable that it's going to happen here as well. China was hit hard. Italy is being devastated right now. And if I have any Italian listeners out there, I heard from one the other day, but if you're able, I'd love to hear from you guys as far as your perspective about what you're seeing and hearing on the ground there. Italy right now is under a nationwide quarantine. That whole country is on lockdown. And I see France and Spain now have joined in on that front as well. In Italy, they don't even have enough beds to treat the infected. Doctors have to make decisions, on who lives and who dies. It's awful. And Italy, has a large elderly population there, so they've been really hit the hardest by the virus so far. Here in this country, whatever the official number is of the infected, you have to ignore it because it's a hell of a lot higher than whatever the current number being reported is. Right? If you can't test people, it's hard to know how many people are sick and don't even know it. So it's also that fear of the unknown that I think is really unnerving to a lot of people. Now, I've seen a lot of people downplaying this, comparing it to the flu. They say, oh, the flu kills far more people. I don't understand what the hysteria is about. The government has its own task force that it has set up for this coronavirus. And one of the voices on that task force is one of the few that I trust. He's one of the more respected names in the country. Dr. Fauci. You've probably heard of him or seen him on TV giving updates. He himself says that COVID-19 is 10 times deadlier than the flu. 3 months ago, he was tweeting that this was going to be a global pandemic and people laughed at him. Well, no one's laughing now. No one is laughing now. You've got large companies, you've got sports leagues that make millions and billions of dollars off of business as usual that are shutting everything down. The NBA, they weren't mandated to shut down. They made a choice. Airlines are not cutting flights because they felt like it. Restaurants, in a lot of cases, are not shutting down because they want to go out of business. Schools aren't closing because it's all just one big giant hoax. I even saw, Kevin Castle, and shout out to Kevin Castle from DTKC, talking about how hard his own business, the club business, is being impacted by what's going on. I don't know what it's going to take to convince some of these people to take this stuff seriously. I'm not saying you got to freak out, the end is nigh, but pay attention to what's going on and use common sense. Better safe than sorry. Everything we do before a pandemic like this is going to feel like an overreaction. Everything we do after a pandemic is going to feel like it's not enough. That's the best way that I heard somebody put it. It's so true. My real fear, I'll tell you my real fear, in watching all of the panic and just everything that's going on. And I'm watching a lot of what's unfolding and reading stories from doctors and hospital workers on the ground going through this right now in Europe. And you got to figure they're probably a good 10 days to 2 weeks ahead of where we are right now. So one of my fears is that we're about 10 days to 2 weeks behind and that some of this may be coming our way. But I'm reading some of these stories. It's the effect that this is going to have on our hospitals and our healthcare system. The shortages that we might see here in medical personnel. These are the people on the front lines that we rely on these people to stop this from getting worse. But what happens when doctors and nurses get sick? What do? Well, they self-quarantine just like the rest of us, which means fewer doctors and fewer nurses. And that's what makes this so scary. I can't even imagine the anxiety that I would have if my mother was still around right now. You guys know all the health issues that she had. I mean, I'd be more worried about her than myself or anybody else. I'd be freaking out right now. If she had to be around to go through something like this, as compromised as her immune system and her situation was, I can't even imagine. You know, we don't have enough people. We don't have enough beds, and we may end up not having enough equipment to support what's coming. You know, there's one town in Washington State where more than a quarter of the local fire department is under quarantine right now. Now, what if this starts to take a toll on fire departments and police departments and EMS workers? You know, they're not robots. They're human beings. They get sick too, just like you and I. I want all of you to be safe. What do I say in my sign-off at the end of every podcast that I've been doing, for most of the last 13 years? All right? Be well and stay safe. I say it every single week. And I mean that. That's why I say it. I don't want you coming back to life and trying to bite me in the zombie apocalypse, okay? I watched the show. I know how this works. I know how this starts. So I preface all of the wrestling talk with that, to say that in the grand scheme of things, wrestling really doesn't seem so important. You know, this is primarily a wrestling podcast, obviously, so that's the focus, but there are more important things going on in the world, which is why the prospect of WWE having to cancel or postpone WrestleMania, which as of this morning still has not happened. I know that upsets some people who think that WWE should stand their ground. It's all media hype. You know, don't cave in. Or there are other people who seem to be more concerned about losing money on their hotel reservation if they can't go. Those people need to wake up. They need to wake up. That is not a valid argument for why WrestleMania should go on as planned on April 5th. Forget the fans for a second. What about the performers? I don't hear anybody talking about the wrestlers. And the production staff and the people who are still traveling and working and putting these shows together. I mean, it sucks. This entire situation sucks. I don't want to see WrestleMania canceled. Nor is it good for my own show. Or my YouTube channel if there's no WrestleMania show for me to stream a review for. So believe me, I don't like this any more than some of you do. But WrestleMania cannot move forward on April 5th. WrestleMania will not move forward on April 5th. They will have no choice but to postpone the event to a later date, or, I suppose if they really wanted to, they could spread some of the matches out over a period of weeks on Raw and SmackDown. I don't think that's ideal, but they could do that if they wanted to. You know, the city of Tampa and the mayor's office, they convened a meeting on Thursday where the belief was that they might make a decision after that meeting on Thursday with respect to WrestleMania. Instead, they put the ball squarely in WWE's court to make the final decision. You know, Les Miller, he's the county commissioner down there in Tampa, said that he's hoping Vince McMahon and WWE will make the call themselves. But a week from now, if they still have not done so, and they're basically still playing a game of chicken with each other, in his words, they're probably going to have to pull the plug on WrestleMania. The writing is on the wall. You had the county sheriff. The county sheriff commended every sports franchise for erring on the side of caution, and he said he hopes WWE follows suit. He said, I don't ever want to see people put profit over public safety. Talk about a black eye on Vince McMahon and WWE when you've got the local sheriff who has to go public and say, boy, I don't want to see people putting profit over public safety. It's not a good look for WWE to be the last holdout. Sounds like they're trying to guilt WWE into pulling the plug on the event themselves. Now, there may be reasons why WWE is stalling that we're not aware of. It's very possible that if WWE makes the call on their own, they're on the hook for monies that they can't recoup. If they've made certain commitments contractually, if they're the ones that kind of push that button and make the final decision, they could be on the hook and, lose out on money or certain things. Whereas if the county or the city, or who knows, even the federal government, if they were ultimately to pull the plug, maybe they lose a lot less. Maybe it's all a matter of covering their ass and protecting themselves. Case in point, look at WrestleCon. Every year, WrestleMania weekend, you've got WrestleCon, right? It used to be Wrestle Reunion many years ago. When I first started going to WrestleMania in that year in Miami, that was the final Wrestle Reunion convention. That was Wrestle Reunion 7. And I don't know if it was the very next year, but in the years that followed, WrestleCon basically took the place of what had been Wrestle Reunion. And, it's become a very successful convention. I've been to a number of the WrestleCon events. You remember that one year in Orlando? I got to work for Fight TV, and I did a whole bunch of interviews at WrestleCon, and it was great. Michael Bakicchio, he not only runs WrestleCon every year, he also runs highspots.com as well. And he recorded a video this week explaining where things stand, because he still has not pulled the plug on WrestleCon. And he had to record a video and explain to the viewers and the customers where things stood. He's in a similar boat as WWE is, obviously on a much smaller scale. But he's in a similar boat in that he has contracts with venues and hotels. And if they have to cancel, he himself, his family, he and his wife are personally on the hook to pay the full amount, which is in the thousands, maybe tens of thousands of dollars. And that doesn't even include all of the refunding of people's money, which he says at the end of all this, if there is a cancellation, everybody's money will be refunded. It may take some time. He's got to literally sit there and do it himself, one by one, but he will refund everyone's money if he has to. But it would be devastating to him and his family. The hotels are the worst part because of the way that he had to book all of the rooms in advance. And he, if he has to pay for all of those rooms, he said flat out, it's going to bankrupt WrestleCon. That's going to be the end of WrestleCon. And it may bankrupt High Spots as well. And he and his wife would have to sell their house. So what they're hoping for is that the city of Tampa issues an order that prohibits gatherings of a certain size. That would allow them legally to get out of those deals without being financially liable. That's why they haven't canceled, and that's why they haven't issued any refunds yet. He said, look, if it were me, and I was flying in for WrestleCon, I wouldn't want to, I had kids with me, my family. He goes, I wouldn't fly in. I wouldn't feel safe flying in right now. So he gets it. But he's waiting to see what WWE does, and he's waiting to see what the city does. If there's no WrestleMania, he made it very clear. He took a poll on Twitter of his customers and his followers. He says, if there's no WrestleMania, then there's no WrestleCon. People are not flying into Tampa just for WrestleCon. The two go hand in hand. The longer Vince McMahon drags this out, the worse it's not only going to be for people like Bakicchio. And look, he made the choice to piggyback off WrestleMania each year. Vince McMahon is not responsible for whether or not WrestleCon lives or dies. But the longer Vince McMahon drags this out, it's unfair to all of the fans who paid for their tickets, their airfare, their hotel, who are waiting to see whether or not there's even going to be a WrestleMania at all. Although at this point, you would have to be absolutely out of your mind to fly to Tampa for any of those shows. Hall of Fame, NXT TakeOver, Raw, SmackDown, and especially WrestleMania, which is the biggest gathering of them all. 60, 70, 80,000 people in one place at one time. That seems like a bad idea. Not only a bad idea for the people going to the show, it sounds like a bad idea for the people in Tampa. These people are being selfish. They could be spreading shit and not even realize it. If I lived in Tampa, I wouldn't want these people flying in for WrestleMania. I'd think that's a bunch of bullshit. Stay the hell out of my state. That's what I would say. That's why the idea of WWE relocating to another state or another country, if I'm that other state or I'm that other country, I don't want WWE. I don't want 80,000 people descending on my state or my country right now, given everything that's going on. But you're not going to find very many places where you'd even be allowed to do that now anyway because of all the restrictions. The writing is on the wall. You've got travel bans. So if you're coming in from Europe, and the US just added the UK and Ireland to that list, for a period of 30 days, you will not be able to fly to the United States. So all of those international fans who fly in for WrestleMania every year, and we hear the soccer chants and everything else, and they do I know not everybody is a fan of all the chants and everything, but they tend to make WrestleMania and the night after WrestleMania kind of fun. They're not going to be able to come in. But why would they even want to fly here and sit in a stadium with thousands of people? To me is just beyond insane. It's irresponsible. And so they've got no choice but to cancel or postpone, because if he doesn't, it's pretty obvious Tampa's going to do it for him. You've got the NBA season suspended, NHL season suspended, Major League Baseball, spring training games suspended. Opening day on March 26th has been delayed by 2 weeks. I'd bet anything that it's going to be delayed a lot more than 2 weeks. 2 weeks was to buy themselves some time to figure out what their next move is going to be. South by Southwest, right? The big event down there in Austin, Texas every year, canceled for the first time. E3, I know we have a lot of gamers who listen. E3 in June, canceled. Coachella, postponed until October. Pearl Jam, postponing their North American dates. The New Japan Cup, all remaining dates that were scheduled in the New Japan Cup that weren't canceled, canceled. The New Japan Cup is dead. The XFL. XFL was kind of humming along, although this past week their ratings really weren't very good at all. But the XFL has suspended the remainder of its season. And after that announcement was made, we come to find out that the first XFL player has tested positive for coronavirus, a player on the Seattle Dragons. What makes Vince McMahon think that he is any different than any of those other leagues? I mean, the XFL, I guess, is his league. He's got 2 leagues now. But all he's doing is delaying the inevitable. And it's a terrible position to be in, because what do? Do you postpone for another date in May or June and hope that things are, back to normal by May or June? I don't think they're going to be back to normal by May or June. I'm not even convinced things are going to be back to normal in time for SummerSlam. This could go on for several months. People who think in a month or two this is going to be over, you people are about to be sorely disappointed. So do you extend the stories and the build to some of these matches? Do you extend that out indefinitely? We have a Universal Champion now in Bill Goldberg, who they only put the title on to get it clearly onto Roman Reigns. Now we're faced with the prospect of Goldberg as champion for months to come. Look at Drew McIntyre. Poor Drew McIntyre. I do feel bad for him. This was going to be his big moment if we assume that he was going to beat Brock Lesnar, and that's not a guarantee, but I'm pretty safe in assuming that they probably would have, and probably still will, at some point, change the title. And, he would have gotten his big moment beating Brock Lesnar and becoming champion for the first time in front of 75,000 people. And now he gets deprived of that moment. Potentially. I feel bad for him. Do you keep the title on Brock Lesnar for another 6 months and hope that, things blow over by then so that you could change the title in front of actual living, breathing human beings? Do you just move WrestleMania to the Performance Center like they're doing with all their other shows? I think that would be a terrible idea. I think WrestleMania at the PC is a horrendous idea. But if their hands are tied and everything else is shut down, you know what? They may not have much of a say in the matter. Maybe Lesnar and McIntyre can stay home and play each other on WWE 2K20, assuming it doesn't glitch out on them. And they could put the title on the line, and whoever wins is the champion. If Drew wins, then Brock can mail the belt to him. That way nobody gets sick. I mean, here's the problem, though, with pro wrestling. The problem is that pro wrestling, I think more than any other sport or form of entertainment, is reliant upon the crowd. The crowd is part of the show. And I don't just mean the people who try to be part of the show by chanting stupid things or making stupid funny faces on camera. The crowd is part of the show. Pro wrestling is reliant upon crowd reactions to guide who's over and who's not, what's working and what's not. Those special moments, those big returns where you want to hear the big pop and see people losing their mind, all of that is gone when you work in front of an empty building. So yeah, for the first week, and maybe even week 2 and week 3, it's something different, it's something novel, but after that, the novelty wears off. If things get worse and the government institutes some sort of nationwide quarantine, or states individually begin implementing statewide quarantines, that's even worse, because then there are no shows. And we end up with a wrestling off-season with no end in sight. I saw some people cracking jokes about that. We may finally get that elusive wrestling off-season, but that would be devastating to the pro wrestling industry if that happened. You know, a lot of industries are going to be devastated by this, but pro wrestling may be more than most. And I'll say this, if they insist on doing these empty building shows at the PC, the minute that one of their talents gets sick and tests positive for this virus, game over. All shows are going to be suspended just like every other sports league. I'm surprised they're even going on with these shows. How safe is that? You know, think about it. How safe is it really? Given that all the men and women on the roster, they're rolling around with each other. You've got sweat and spit flying and blood. You're asking them to fly to Orlando every single week. I mean, some of them live down there already. They're already local, but not all of them. I don't know how wise it is for them to even be doing these shows. And that goes for AEW also. This is not just a WWE problem. AEW is moving ahead with empty building shows as well. I don't know how bright that is. But consider this, you know, John Cena is in one of the feature matches of WrestleMania this year. We saw him in the empty building on Friday night, him and Bray Wyatt. And they're still promoting their match. And John Cena, he was going to work WrestleMania this year, likely still will, but I would guess after that he was going to go film his next movie, whatever his next film is. Now, I'm sure a lot of films are probably going to be delaying shooting with everything that's been going on. I know Fast and Furious 9, which is Cena's next big film release, that was due to come out in May, and now it's been pushed back to April of next year, because there's a lot of uncertainty about when this pandemic really is going to die down. They don't want to take any chances. You know, the global... Who in their right mind would even want to go to a movie theater right now? You know, a lot of the movie theaters here in New York now, they're still open, but they've slashed capacity, and they've instituted these social distancing rules so people can't sit within a certain number of seats of each other. Who would go to a movie theater right now? Geez, I mean, just stay home. You got Amazon Prime, you got Netflix, you got Hulu, you got rentals, whatever. I mean, I don't know. You'd have to be a very brave person, I think, to go to a movie theater. I mean, I don't even like going to movie theaters to begin with. This is just a perfect excuse not to go to a movie theater. But you aren't going to have very many people going to see movies. This is all over the world. So, yes, I understand these studios wanting to push back these big releases that are going to get absolutely nailed if they were to move ahead and come out now. I wonder at some point if a lot of studios make that call, you're not going to have any new movies coming out. It's not going to matter. They're going to have to shut down the theaters anyway if there's no new movies coming out. So they've pushed that back almost a year. But think about this. If they postpone WrestleMania by 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and then John Cena is not available to wrestle Bray Wyatt. You know, Cena's a loyal guy. I'm sure he's going to do everything in his power to make sure he, you know, sticks to his commitment and works that match. But what if he can't? You know, what if he's not available? What if some studio head says no? There's no easy answer here, but the solution, I think, would be to take their chances and hope that things start to get back to normal by the beginning of the summer. Now, it may not, but cross your fingers, hope it does, and plan for either a June or a July WrestleMania in Tampa, which is not ideal. You know, doing WrestleMania outdoors in the middle of the summer. But shoot for that. Shoot for a June or July WrestleMania. I imagine they've probably already spent a lot of money on a nice pirate ship theme set for the show. You don't want that to go to waste, I'm sure. Hold off and do the show this summer if you can. If you can't for whatever reason, worst case scenario, you merge Mania and SummerSlam together in August as one giant super show in Boston. Summer Mania. Wrestle Slam. Call it whatever you want. They've already got dates that week, you know, in Boston for NXT TakeOver, Raw, Smack. It's almost like a WrestleMania type of week. You know, book for Boston. You pay off all the big WrestleMania matches there. Maybe some of the mid-card matches for WrestleMania, you can spread them out in the weeks to come on Raw and SmackDown at the PC. But you can't do those bigger matches in front of an empty crowd. You can't do Roman Reigns against Bill Goldberg with no audience. You just can't do it. Edge and Randy Orton, Undertaker and AJ Styles. How are you going to do those matches in front of no crowd? At some point, things are going to get back to normal. I think you take your chances and you wait it out. I don't think you blow these matches off at the PC. And no, Saudi Arabia is not an option. I've seen people joking about that. They've closed their borders. They've stopped all sports activities. So even if they wanted to, no, they cannot bring WrestleMania to Saudi Arabia this year. Now, a lot of other shows have been impacted by the virus as well, not just WrestleMania, potentially. The WWE live event at Madison Square Garden next Sunday is canceled. MSG has been closed. They were promoting an NXT women's title defense on that show, Rhea Ripley defending against Bianca Belair. They are promoting another DX reunion. Got to sell those tickets. Let's trot out some more of the legends again. They were going to promote a big DX reunion for the show, so that's off. Production on all FS1 studio shows has been suspended, at least through this week and maybe longer. That includes WWE Backstage. CM Punk was due to return to the show this week. His last appearance was way back on February 11th when the world was a lot simpler than it is today. So it looks like that's going to remain his last appearance for the time being. Raw tomorrow night in Pittsburgh has been canceled. That show will instead emanate live from the WWE Performance Center, which looks to be the company's home base going forward until this all blows over. And boy, did that PC turn out to be a good investment for WWE. Although they don't actually own the Performance Center. They have a lease on the property. As a matter of fact, I think their lease is up in November. I think their lease is up this year. So Monday, tomorrow, is 316 Day. So Stone Cold Steve Austin is going to be on the show. There'll be no Stone Cold Pop this week when the glass shatters. That's going to be very strange. And Undertaker is scheduled to be there. And again, this could all change in light of everything. But they were still promoting an Undertaker appearance along with AJ Styles for a contract signing for their match at WrestleMania. Full Sail University has shut down all classes and group events going forward. That includes the NXT tapings on Wednesday nights, which means that NXT is going to be back again at the PC this week after Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa basically destroyed half the place during their brawl, their epic brawl that I loved on last week's show. SmackDown this coming Friday is going to be back again at the PC as well. AEW is impacted by this as well. This week's Dynamite show is scheduled for Rochester, New York. Brody Lee's hometown, who had been expected to make his debut for the company at that show, possibly as the Exalted One of the Dark Order. We're still getting the big reveal this week for the Exalted One. But instead, the show will be taking place at Daly's Place in Jacksonville, Florida. Even though the mayor of Jacksonville later announced that he was suspending all large gatherings within the city through the end of the month. The AEW show, I guess, is not going to have any fans. Only essential personnel, or if they do have fans, it'll be limited to staff and family members, and that's it. So I guess they can move ahead with the show. The Rochester date has been rescheduled for July 8th. So if you were planning on going, if you have a ticket, I imagine it would just be honored on that date. You might want to call Ticketmaster to find out, but that is the new date for the Rochester show. The Big Blood and Guts show, March 25th in Newark, New Jersey, which sold over 10,000 tickets, I think, on the first day that they went on sale, has been rescheduled for July 22nd. And we don't know yet if that means that the Blood and Guts match between the Inner Circle and the Elite is delayed until July or not. It looks like they're still moving forward with doing it in 10 days, just maybe doing it from Daly's Place in front of no fans. Since on TV this coming Wednesday, they're still moving ahead with the match. There's it's either a 6-man or an 8-man tag, I think 6-man tag, to determine the man advantage in the War Games match, which they're calling Blood and Guts. Can't call it War Games, but that's what it is. They're having a match on TV this week to determine the man advantage. I'm not even sure they'd have enough room to set up 2 rings at Daly's Place. Daly's Place, it's a unique location. They've done a few shows from there. It's kind of like an outdoor venue, but it's very small. So I guess it would have to, if you don't have any fans, I guess you technically could open it up and put 2 rings side by side. I guess they could if they wanted to. On the other hand, Matt Hardy, who is a free agent, unless he has already secretly signed and we just don't know yet, but he is free from the clutches of WWE. He tweeted that lots of promoters have reached out to him and his wife Rebby about running shows from the Hardy compound and the Dome of Deletion. I think an AEW show from the Hardy compound would be pretty cool. You know, Impact taped a show there once. Tony Khan, by the way, was on the AEW Unrestricted podcast, and he revealed his original name for AEW. It was not always going to be called All Elite Wrestling. The name that he almost went with, and I think he came up with this himself, and then he thought better of it, the name he almost went with was World's Best Wrestling. WBW. Thank God he didn't. That is an awful name. That sounds like a name that somebody would have come up with for their eFed. The Dynamite show scheduled for April Fool's Day in Milwaukee will be relocated elsewhere. The date in Milwaukee has been postponed to October 28th. And the Dynamite show April 8th in St. Louis will also be relocated elsewhere. The date in St. Louis will be made up on October 7th. Ring of Honor, they canceled their 18th anniversary pay-per-view on Friday and their past versus present show last night. No word on their Supercard of Honor show April 4th in Lakeland, Florida. My guess is that that's going to be canceled as well. And they had a lot of New Japan talent coming in for that show who now may not be able to anyway, so I don't see how they go on with that show. Impact Wrestling, their lockdown show is coming up on March 28th. They were partnering with Border City Wrestling, and they were going to be holding the event, I guess, at St. Clair College, and now comes the news that they have lost the venue. They now have no venue for lockdown. They have to search for a new one because St. Clair College has canceled all on-campus events, and that includes lockdown through the beginning of April. So they are currently mulling over their options to see where and if they could still hold that lockdown show on the 28th. So that looks to be in jeopardy right now. There has been no announcement made about the Crockett Cup pay-per-view April 19th or NWA Power tapings in Atlanta on the 20th and the 21st, so I have no idea what the NWA plans are. CMLL in Mexico announced that all of their shows going forward are on hold indefinitely. As I mentioned before, all remaining New Japan Cup dates are canceled through March 21st. They are going to be making an announcement soon about all of their dates from March 22nd onward, once they've had a chance to monitor the situation and see where things stand right now over in Japan. And for the UFC fans out there, I know we have more than a few who listen to this show. Dana White, he was on SportsCenter last night. UFC London is moving to a venue somewhere else. The March 28th and April 11th shows will no longer be held in Las Vegas. And the Khabib versus Ferguson fight will not take place in Brooklyn or in Las Vegas, but it will happen. They are determined to make this fight happen. Doing his best Vince McMahon impression is Dana White. Dana has vowed that the fights will go on unless the country goes into a total shutdown. Short of a complete and total quarantine or lockdown of the country, these shows are going to go on. So says Dana White. And I believe that's it for now. That's a lot of updates, and this is changing by the hour, so it's very possible that you will have additional information by the time some of you listen to this. But that's a lot of cancellations. That's a lot of postponements, and it just goes to show the widespread effect. And that's only the bigger promotions. Those are only the promotions that are more well-known, that have television or even a presence on YouTube in the case of the NWA. That doesn't even include what's going on with independent wrestling, which is going to get hit and just clobbered the longer this goes on for, even worse than a WWE or an AEW. They at least have the money and the resources to withstand some kind of a long shutdown like this. A lot of independent promotions, a lot of international promotions, even in Japan and other countries, they don't have the means to survive a prolonged shutdown or quarantine of any kind. And so I feel badly for a lot of those independent wrestlers who, they rely on those paychecks, and now those paychecks aren't coming in. They don't have guaranteed contracts. They don't have some kind of base salary or some kind of guarantee, of any kind. So they're going to get impacted by this badly. And if you know there's one thing wrestling promoters can't get enough of, it's money. So if they're canceling or postponing shows, then you know it must be serious. The one other thing I wanted to mention just before I move on from all this virus stuff, I was thinking about this. All the sports leagues that have suspended play for the time being, you wonder what the hell happens with a network like an ESPN. I mean, they got 3 of them, I think. ESPN, ESPN2. Yeah, I think there's an ESPN3. I know there's an ESPN Deportes. And you could say the same thing, I guess, about Fox Sports as well. But I'm thinking, like, what the hell does ESPN do in the meantime? I guess you could always talk about sports. I mean, there's always going to be something to talk about. But with all of the live sports suspended for the foreseeable future, and you know that there's a lot of people who are only sticking with cable TV in this country, strictly for the live sports. It's going to be very interesting to see if this results, the longer this goes on for, if this results in a huge increase in the number of people who finally are just have had enough and they cut the cord from cable. If these people are sitting at home and they're bored, you know, they're self-isolated in their home, they have nothing to do, they have no sports to watch, they have no reason to watch ESPN, so they subscribe to a YouTube TV trial to check out that service, or a Hulu, or some other streaming platform. Look, if I'm a service like a YouTube TV or a Sling, I'd be offering an extended trial of my service to lure people in to try it out. I know YouTube TV right now is offering 2 weeks free. That deal ends today, Sunday, March 15th. So if you're listening to this in time and you want to take advantage of it, get on it. I tried YouTube TV out for a couple of weeks a few months ago. I liked it. I wasn't convinced that I was ready to cut the cord. Even though I'm paying far more than I should be for my cable, I probably will end up cutting the cord at some point. But that, I think, could be a lingering effect of this. The longer this goes on, it could spur more people on to say, you know what? I don't need cable anymore. I don't need to be paying $200, $300, $400 a month for cable. The hell with this. And you could end up seeing a surge in users for YouTube TV and other platforms like that.